All right, good afternoon. This morning, the Secretary General in the General Assembly Hall spoke at the part one of the fifth Least Developed Countries Conference. In his remarks, he said that vulnerabilities that landlocked developing countries face today, like climate change and COVID-19, may be different than they were 50 years ago when the first conference occurred. However, if left unaddressed, the results will still be inequality, poverty, and hunger. He highlighted the 5 areas of the Doha Programme of Action that will help with the recovery of the least developed countries. These are access to vaccines, a global financial system that puts them first, structural transformation that allows them to be competitive in the global economy, climate action, and peace and security. The Secretary General reiterated the UN's support for the Programme of Action to all the least developing countries. His full remarks have been shared with you. Also this afternoon, the Secretary General will address the meeting of the members of the Forum of Small Island States, where he will give an update on the progress of the proposals of our common agenda since he last met the group in October of last year. Our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is in Paris today, where she held meetings with the Transforming Education Summit. That summit is being convened by the Secretary General, will take place in New York during the high-level week of the General Assembly this autumn. It aims to mobilize governments and partners to renew their collective commitment to education as a preeminent global public good. As you know, billions of young people have suffered learning losses during the pandemic. Update for you on Ukraine. Our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that the situation in the country continues to deteriorate, with fighting ongoing, including in Mariupol, Sumy, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Severodonetsk, and northern Kiev. Food and water supplies are dwindling, and humanitarian organizations are deeply concerned about the well-being of civilians trapped inside these cities. Large-scale displacement continues with more than 5 million people on the move in the last 3 weeks, including almost 3.2 million people, mostly women and children, who have crossed international borders out of Ukraine, and that's according to UNHCR. Further on the movement out of Ukraine, UNHCR and the International Organization for Migration transferred more than 5,000 Ukrainian men, women, and children from Ukraine's border with Moldova to Romania between March 8th and 17th, today. These ongoing transfers have been made in support of the governments of Moldova and Romania, who agreed on these arrangements. More than 350,000 people have fled to Moldova, with more than 102,000 refugees staying in the country. And we are also being told by our humanitarian colleagues that more than 928,000 people are without electricity, and some 259,000 people have been cut off from gas supplies across Ukraine. And that's according to the Ukraine Ministry of Energy. The hardest hit areas include Chernihiv, Donetsk, Kievatska, Mykolaiivska, and Zaporizhzhia oblasts. The World Health Organization has verified 43 attacks on healthcare and stresses that health facilities, healthcare workers, and patients, as well as medical transport, must always be respected and protected. Humanitarian operations have so far reached more than 600,000 people with some form of assistance since the 24th of February. On funding, the Ukraine Flash Appeal 2022 has received $407 million so far, which represents 36%, and that's up from 22% just yesterday. We very much thank all the donors who have released pledged amounts and moved them into cash, and we encourage others to release money as quickly as possible and report their contributions to OCHA's financial tracking system. The outpouring of support from people around the world also continues, with UN agencies receiving record amounts from private sector companies and from public donations. The UN's Crisis Relief Fund for the Ukraine Humanitarian Fund has received more than $3 million in donations from 30,000 people in more than 140 countries. These are small donations of about $100 each. I also want to flag that this afternoon at 3 p.m., the Security Council will hold a meeting We'll be meeting on Ukraine, be meeting to discuss Ukraine. Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, will brief, along with Dr. Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, and UNHCR's Assistant High Commissioner for Operations, Raouf Mazou. We're all trying to get those remarks for you ahead of time. We've also received some questions about the withdrawal of Ukrainian peacekeepers from our peacekeeping missions in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I can tell you that the process to facilitate the departure of Ukrainian troops, helicopters, and other personnel from peacekeeping mission in the DRC is currently underway. But right now, the units remain fully operational while arrangements for their departure are being finalized. Discussions have been initiated and are continuing with other troop contributing countries to fill any gaps created as a result of their departure. We will update you when we have more information. And following the end of at the end of yesterday's pledging event on Yemen, 36 donors had pledged nearly $1.3 billion for the humanitarian response. To give you some context, $1.3 billion represents only 30% of the roughly $5.4 billion required for an efficient and effective response to the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. In a situation of severe underfunding, every dollar counts and is appreciated. While the Secretary General wants to thank those donors who pledged for their generosity and encourage them to convert all pledges into cash as soon as possible, what is very clear from his standpoint is that we would have hoped to have raised even more money yesterday. And as we've been telling you, humanitarian programs in Yemen are facing unprecedented funding shortages that are forcing reductions and closures of life-saving assistance. We will continue to look for more funds for Yemen. And in northern Ethiopia, our humanitarian colleagues continue to be extremely concerned about the situation in Tigray, Afar, and Amhara. It has been impossible to deliver aid by road into Tigray for the last 3 months. That's largely due to the fighting along that route into neighboring Afar region. Many aid activities remain reduced or suspended in Tigray. Over the past week, more than 7,000 men, women, and children received food assistance, an extremely small fraction of the 870,000 whom our UN colleagues are trying to assist each week. Our partners also warn that less than 10% of the required amount of seeds have been brought into Tigray before the start of the planting season, which is only 1 month away. Medical and nutrition supplies continue to be flown into the capital, Mekelle, with 18 tons flown in the past week. These supplies allowed for more than 100,000 livestock to be vaccinated just last week. However, as we've been telling you, these are far less than we could transport by road. Further compounding the problem, the shortages of fuel make it distribute the supplies that do get into Mekelle. In Afar, an estimated 200,000 men, women, and children displaced by the fighting remain in areas that we and our partners cannot reach due to ongoing insecurity issues. In accessible parts of Afar, more than 112,000 people have received food assistance since late February. Our humanitarian colleagues aim to reach some 620,000 people in the coming week. In Amhara, people continue to flee to the Kobo, Zekwala, Sekota, and Zarima districts. These men, women, and children need additional shelters and other forms of assistance. In Amhara, the UN and the government and our local NGO partners have provided food to some 430,000 people in the past week, bringing the total number of people reached to more than 8 million since last December. And moving on to Afghanistan, the High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, ended a 4-day visit to the country. He appealed for robust assistance to address the Afghanistan's humanitarian needs and those of Afghans abroad who are refugees. Mr. Grandi noted that as much as the world is rightfully preoccupied with the war in Ukraine, Afghanistan is experiencing a very grave crisis indeed. During his meetings, Mr. Grandi said UNHCR's commitment to stay and deliver humanitarian aid to the people of Afghanistan is unwavering. So far in 2022, UNHCR assistance and relief programs have helped more than 500,000 Afghans. Update on the ongoing situation in Mozambique and Malawi due to the storms. We, along with our partners, are scaling up support following the passage of tropical cyclone Gombe, which struck the Mozambique's coast last Friday. The storm caused widespread flooding and displacement and damage to infrastructure and homes. Needs assessments have been ongoing since early this week, alongside initial response activities and search and rescue operations. We and our partners are deploying more personnel in Nampula and other impacted provinces. We're also mobilizing priority assistance, including food, shelter, and household items, water and sanitation items, and healthcare support. The Government Institute for Disaster Management and Reduction indicates that more than 400,000 people have been affected by the cyclone, including tens of thousands of men, women, and children previously displaced due to the crisis in the country's north. The UN resident humanitarian coordinator for Mozambique, Mirta Collard, has met with affected people, humanitarian responders, and local authorities. Scaling up the response will be critical. Several districts remain inaccessible, and available humanitarian stocks within Mozambique can support up to 100,000 people. Southern Malawi was also hit by the storm. We, along with our partners, are working with authorities there to assess the needs. The weather systems remain active, and there's expected to strengthen again to the level of a tropical storm. Quick COVID updates, one from Honduras, where today we received our donations of nearly 350,000 doses of Pfizer vaccines from the U.S. through COVAX. We thank the U.S., and that's nearly half of the nearly 700,000 doses on their way. As of Tuesday, 12 million vaccines were applied, with over 4.6 million people now being fully vaccinated. That's over 46% of our eligible population. In Namibia, our team tells us that COVID-19 situation has improved in the past month, with active cases having increased by 92%. The team, led by resident coordinator Stéphane, continues supporting safety measures and boosting vaccines. WHO is supporting a plan to ensure that the public health system can withstand future health shocks, and UNDP is working with authorities to assess the impact of the pandemic on tourism, while FAO is assessing the impact on food systems. Edith.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of follow-ups. First, does the Secretary General have any comment on the bombing of this theater in Mariupol?
I think one can only be shocked and extremely saddened by what we've seen. And I would refer you to what the Secretary General said what Secretary General said earlier this week at the stakeout about the targeting of and the hitting of civilian infrastructure, whether by mistake or intentionally.
Second follow-up on Tigray. Has any thought been given to airdropping food and other humanitarian aid?
Well, you know, we're delivering some humanitarian aid, notably medical supplies, by air, because those are smaller, they're easier to carry. The problem is that we lack the fuel to distribute it to places we want to go to. Also, airdropping supplies without the ability to, food supplies without the ability to distribute them, also in active combat zones, is extremely expensive, but could also put more people at risk unless you have people on the ground who can distribute it, as we've done in different places.
And my final one on the Yemen pledging event yesterday. There was only one Arab country that pledged yesterday. That was Kuwait. Is the Secretary General disappointed that there was not more outpouring of funds from the region? And does the UN plan to do anything to try to mobilize funding from those countries, especially Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates?
Of course, we can't speak to why certain countries gave more, why certain countries didn't give. You have to ask them. What is clear is that Saudi Arabia, UAE have traditionally been very strong backers of our humanitarian appeals in Yemen. We've always appreciated that partnership. I think Mr. Griffiths expressed his disappointment that some of our traditional partners did not give. I think what needs to be said clearly is that a pledging conference is there to kind of highlight the need and motivate people to give, but it's not as if people can't give after the pledging conference. So we very much hope that those countries who did not give yet, did not pledge, do so. To speak colloquially, the door to the bank remains open. So we hope we still get more pledges, and we hope that those who have pledged also convert those pledges into cash as quickly as possible. Before I go to question, I just want to add that I just got a readout of the Secretary General's phone call with Fatih Bashaga of Libya. The Secretary General had a phone call today with Fatih Bashaga, the former Minister of the Interior of the Government of National Accord of the State of Libya, who was nominated as Prime Minister designate by the Libyan House of Representatives on February 10th. The Secretary General and Mr. Bashaga discussed the latest developments in Libya. The Secretary General expressed deep concern at the ongoing political polarization in Libya, which carries significant risks for Libya's hard-won stability. The Secretary General stressed the need for all actors in Libya to preserve calm and stability on the ground while reiterating the UN's firm rejection of the use of violence, intimidation, and hate speech. He added that the current stalemate requires urgent dialogue to find a consensual way forward and reiterated his full support to mediation efforts as carried out by Special Advisor on Libya, Stephanie Williams. Ray, I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have a question on Yemen. The Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, they announced this morning that they are launching a Yemeni talks that include, and I quote, all the parties without any exclusion. Do you have any comment regarding this initiative? And also another question, if you allow, on Libya.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Does the Secretary General planning to have a phone call with Dbeiba or no?
He already had one. He had one, I think, 10 days ago. There's been so much going on, but he had one. I remember reading the readout. What day exactly, I don't remember, but it was very recently. On Yemen, seeing the press reports, obviously we would welcome any diplomatic initiative that could bring the parties closer and that would be beneficial to all of the people of Yemen. Margaret.
Steph, yesterday we heard from FAO on the wheat prices and the maize prices and such. I was just wondering, do you have any insights from WFP? Are they planning, are they seeking out other potential sources of wheat and supplies? Because if the wheat from Ukraine and or Russia is disrupted, it's going to have reverberations in their work. So what are they planning? And are they reaching out to countries, for instance, like India, which has surpluses? Or has India reached out to them?
The short answer is yes. I think as we know, WFP gets about 50% of its wheat supplies, if I'm not mistaken, from Ukraine. WFP buys on the, they buy on the open market. They have arrangements. The problem is that the commodities prices are going up all over the place. And so I think it's adding, if I'm not mistaken, about $78 million a month to their monthly purchase bill. And so there are two things. There's getting the actual commodity, whether it's wheat or maize or whatever the grains they're buying, which you can have access to. The problem is the added cost, which WFP has to incur on a daily on a monthly basis. Yes, ma'am.
So then WFP is not concerned about there not actually being enough wheat to feed people. It's more about the cost of getting it.
That's my understanding. Philippe.
Thank you, Stéphane. On Libya, the phone call was initiated by the Secretary General?
Yes, it was. He spoke. He's reached out. He has reached out to both.
Does that mean that he recognized the new power and forget the other
No.
one?
He's spoken to both. He's spoken to both men.
But I mean, this is the first time today that he's talking to the new prime minister.
The only, first of all, as you know, we're not in the business of recognizing countries. What the Secretary General recognizes is that there is a situation in Libya with competing claims to the authority, with a great risk of things going backwards. So he's supporting Stephanie Williams. Our efforts is to ensure that Libya does not go backwards.
Until now, he was supporting the other one.
No,
and UN. I mean UN and when he was named, he was named with the support of the UN, the other one. So now you say that Gutierrez is talking to the new one, so it means that he doesn't support anymore the other one.
It's not a matter of supporting. There was a process, Libyan-led process, with a prime minister. The Secretary General is not in the business of anointing or appointing prime ministers or ministers. What our focus on is on trying to avert an even worse crisis. What we've always said is that Libyan leaders should be chosen through a Libyan-led process that is transparent and that is accountable.
Yeah, but he can do pressure, and a phone call is a kind of pressure. And I mean, does he ask behind the scene the resignation of the first one?
No, the Secretary General is not asking for anyone's resignation. What we have said is that Ms. Williams has offered her good offices, is trying to bring the parties together so that the solution is one that is supported by the Libyan people, where political decisions on leadership are agreed upon through transparent and accountable processes. But it's not about the Secretary General choosing favorites, far from it. Yes, sir, and then, go ahead. No, 1 second, Gregory. Yeah, good.
Thank you, Stéphane. Security Council today adopted a resolution extending the mandate of UNAMA.
Mm-hmm.
Does the UN in this resolution establish in any way formal ties with Taliban government? Because some news report suggesting that.
Again, we're not in the recognition business. That's a member state prerogative. We're in the business of trying to help people. So, as part of our efforts, we engage with the de facto authorities, and we've been engaging with them in Afghanistan. We'll continue to do whatever we need to do to help the Afghan people. Ibtisam.
Steph, a follow-up on Libya, because I have the feeling that there is a change of language. When you were at the beginning talking about a designated prime minister and elected and a process, etc. But from your point of view, who represent Libya as a prime minister? It is not clear anymore.
The situation in Libya has evolved, right? Where you have these competing centers of power. Our aim is to try to diffuse the situation, right? So that there is clarity for the Libyan people, and peace for the Libyan people.
Just a follow-up, or two follow-ups also on something you said before. So how do you want to get there? Like, what are you suggesting to in order to get to that point?
Well, I mean, I think on the way forward, things have not evolved since Rosemary DiCarlo briefed yesterday, and I think she was pretty clear in the vision how we move things forward.
Okay, and on Yemen, so going back to the pledges and the fact that the Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates are also part of the conflict or involved in the conflict, you believe that they have a moral obligation to donate and to aid to the aid fund of the UN.
We believe that there is a moral obligation on a global scale for those who have the means to help those who most need help. There's an obligation for global solidarity across the board. If I can take a pause and just add a little bit more flesh to the bones I was giving Maggie on WFP. WFP said that the cost of their global operations look to increase by $29 million a month when added to pre-existing increases of $42 million a month since 2019. The total additional costs facing WFP are $71 million a month. Stefano, and then Gregory, and then Pam.
Thank you, Stéphane. A follow-up, and then I have another question. On Libya, during the phone conversation, did the Secretary General was able to obtain from the Prime Minister designated Bashaga a promise that he will not try with violence to get into power? Did he ask that specifically?
I have what I have on the phone call. I think if there was a breakthrough to have announced, we would have announced it.
Okay, and then I have another question about his stakeout that he took the other day. I thought that the big news, or the most important out of it, was when he said the phrase within the realm of possibility, that there was a possibility of a nuclear war. It was chilling, like he said. But we noticed, at least I noticed, that in the UN news report, where we see what is, from the headline, usually you see what is the most important out of the speech. Well, there was no mention of the phrase, there was no mention of nuclear possibility. I just give you an example because I show, for example,
the question is, if you're questioning on the edit,
no, the question is, I have the question, specific question. What the Secretary General really meant saying that? Is it really preoccupied? Is it really worried that said the nuclear war can explode at any moment, or it was just something on a speech that wasn't so important?
I think the words that he used to describe the situation were pretty simple and clear, and they reflect his thinking. There was a lot of stuff in that stakeout, and looking at the media coverage, not the UN News media coverage, looking at the media coverage, different news organizations grabbed different points that they thought was most interesting. You're welcome to grab the most important. It doesn't have to be ranked, but everybody makes editorial choices. But what the Secretary General said was clear and to the point.
But Stéphane, I'm sorry, you are the spokesperson of the.
I am the spokesperson. Thank you.
You can answer because I think it's important. What it was for you, spokesperson of the Secretary General, the most important passage in that speech?
Everything that my boss says is important. Okay, Gregory.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister held today a telephone call with Martin Griffiths. Can you please provide some details, and can you please clarify, is UN staff still in Moscow for humanitarian coordination? Thank you.
Yes, I believe they are. I've not seen any change. I think it was about that. I'll try to get you a bit more details for that. Pam.
Steph, is it still the case that there are no blocks on humanitarian deliveries within Ukraine?
Well,
Because a few days ago there were.
The problem is that there's still fighting going on, which makes it
Yes.
difficult. Yeah.
So can you elaborate on what's gotten in and what hasn't?
I can try to get you a bit more detailed readout. The problem is obviously the continued fighting and the fact that we really need guaranteed routes through which we can send aid in and people can get out.
So you need a Security Council resolution?
No. I mean, this is what the humanitarian coordination is all about.
Okay, bigger picture, stepping back. We've all read these articles from our friends, experts like Stephen Schlesinger, the historian of the UN, that previous secretaries general in this kind of circumstance of a war or some kind of conflict have gotten proactively involved in suggesting mediation. Everyone asks us, because we cover the UN, since the Security Council is stalemated on a lot of these issues, what can the Secretary General do more other than voice his support?
I think the Secretary General is doing quite a lot on the diplomatic front. He has been, in a way, trying to help link all of the different efforts and contacts that have been had between the Russians and the Ukrainians. He's been spending a lot of time on the phone. He's been meeting with permanent representatives. He met with, I think, or may still be meeting with Mr. Nebenzia right now. He met with the PRs of the US, UK, and France, I think yesterday or the day before. He's on the phone almost all the time, just trying to push people in the right direction. I think different leaders have different styles, but I can tell you that he remains extremely preoccupied and extremely focused on trying to solve this situation.
All right, thank you. Can you give us a readout of any of these, like Nebenzia?
Yeah, I'll see what I can get. I mean, most of them are focused on Ukraine, as you can imagine.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah. And then we'll go back to Edie if you had another further question.
Do you know how many Ukrainian refugees in Russia, and do they receive any kind of humanitarian assistance?
I believe they do receive assistance. UNHCR has a very good data portal, which will show you where the flow of refugees are. Most are to Poland. We've seen some obviously in Slovakia, Moldova, Romania. Some gone to Belarus, and also a larger number have gone to Russia. The point is that people should go where they want to go and where they feel it is safe for them to go. Edie.
My question is similar to what Stéphane asked, but let me ask it this way. Did Mr. Bashaga give any kind of a response to the Secretary General? And as a result of their conversation, does he plan to go speak again to Mr. Debeba?
This, I think, a large part of this phone call was to reinforce the good offices of Ms. Williams, her efforts to bring the parties together. I think Libya, like a number of other crises that we've seen, each of these steps have to be taken one at a time. Predicting what will happen next 24, 48, 72 hours, I think is a dangerous proposition. So we're just, again, taking one day at a time, trying to preserve the calm, trying to preserve the gains that have benefited the Libyan people since the original accord was signed in 2020, I believe. Stefano.
Yes, this is about the Security Council resolution, the Humanitarian Security Council resolution that Russia is going to present, I believe, tomorrow. what the Secretary General think about it? I mean, does he wish that this resolution pass, or he thinks that it's not complete and so it shouldn't pass?
What the 15 members of the Security Council are the masters of their own domain, master of their own work. They will come up with whatever they come up with. We've seen a lot of divisions on Ukraine. It's an open secret. Whether it's on Ukraine or any other crisis, what helps the work of the Secretary General, the works of the Secretariat, is for the Council to speak with one clear voice.
I'm sorry, but because it's called Humanitarian resolution, and I understand, I didn't read it yet, but I understand that there is something that there are many countries that already say that it's not completed enough, it's not, so they will not vote for it. Does the Secretary General think that even if it's not they should be voted anyway because it's a humanitarian resolution that will help anyway the situation, and maybe then later on a better one can come out, or he thinks that it's, it's not necessary?
We will let the Security Council members do their work. Again, listen to what I'm saying. What helps us, what helps the work of the Secretary General on the diplomatic front, the humanitarian front, is for the Security Council to speak with one strong voice. Speaking of strong voices, Paulina, all yours.